going to start in 2001. We said before the podcast, I'm not going to ask you for details of the box scores I found in the Ann Arbor News from your basketball days. But give me the high school basketball player Vinnie Goodwill. What was in your arsenal?
I was a streaky shooter, right? I was one of those. If I hit two, then I might hit five, right? I was really, really skinny, so that meant that a lot of people you're gonna try to pick on me and like pick and switch, and I really wasn't having that. So that wound up getting me into some not scrums, but high school. You get a little edgy, that type of thing. But my bread and butter, I was really, really quick. And I was left-handed, so I could always get around my guy. I was a really good passer, all that type of stuff. So that was the extent. And I'll say the sad part of my high school basketball career ending was the fact that I had a career high like 2 days after my 17th birthday. Like it was like maybe the third game of the season, something like that. And the game after that, like I think before that I hit like 4 threes. I scored like 18 and had like 8 assists. And like I'm like, oh, okay, I'm cooking now. I had a really good summer and all that type of stuff. The next game, broken wrist.
Oh.
Basketball career was over. Came to school the next day with a big ass cast. Like nobody thought I broke my wrist because I played the rest of the game right-handed.
Wow.
I just thought it was a sprain. And then the pain was so bad, like at 2 a.m, I was like, hey, Dad, I think we got to go to the hospital. So I came to class like 3 hours later with a big cast on my hand because I didn't want to be operated on. And one of my close friends was like, what the hell happened to you? And I was like, remember the game we played last night? Playing with a broken wrist, fool. You know what I mean? So that's where it ends. That's where the heartbreak began.
Who's your NBA player comp? Who were you back in your days?
It's going back in the crates. I would probably say Nick Van Exel, who used to play for the Lakers, Damon Stoudemire, who played for, just because they were little left-handed point guards, jitterbug guys, streaky shooters. Those were my guys. I wanted to be Isaiah, couldn't be Isaiah, but Nick Van Exel, Damon Stoudemire, those are my dudes.
Pretty easy, I imagine, to grow up, in Detroit, be a basketball fan, you play the sport. Did you get the itch to go into journalism when the wrist injury happened and you knew it wasn't going to be a full-time basketball career, but when did you decide that was kind of a career you wanted to pursue?
It was the weirdest thing, Kevin. Like I'm in an honors English class my senior year. And it's like sometime after the wrist injury, while I'm walking around with this cast on my hand for like 3 months. And my English teacher, who was actually one of the assistant football coaches, which is like crazy, right? The assistant football coach is the one that's teaching Shakespeare. And he looks at me and he calls me in, and he knew that I had like a talent for writing because he put me in an honors English class, and I didn't want to go. I wanted to stay with my friends in the regular English class. And he was like, no, you're an honors student. So one day he was like, what are you doing when you go to school? And I was like, I'll just go to school. I'll be a business major or something like that. Like not nothing you had interest in. He was like, why don't you go into sports journalism? And it was like, literally, when I tell you the light bulb hit right at that moment, it had never hit me. I read newspapers every day, Kevin. I would go to find newspapers. You know what I mean? Like that was when you had to go to the microfiche and stuff like that. But I never considered myself a writer. And I knew I was a good writer. I just never thought, oh, you love sports, you're knowledgeable about sports, and you're a good writer for your age. Why don't you go into that? It wasn't until he said that happened for me. Frank Strunk, God bless his soul.
Wow. So when you started to, think about that, how did that kind of thought become more of like a thing in practice, that you started to do it a little bit and then figure out, hey, I'm actually pretty good at this part of writing too?
It wasn't even that drastic, or that like stair step. It was literally from the moment he said it, my whole trajectory changed. Like literally from that point, like I was, like a 3.2 student. I took school halfway serious. I'm like, oh, I can go to sleep in class and wake up and get a B plus as opposed to studying and get an A. I don't care that much. That type of thing. I knew I was going to college. that was always in the plan. That was always going to happen. It was just never thought about what happens when you get there. So that kind of put me in a place. And believe it or not, the first sports writing class I had was with the brother of Cecil Fielder. Remember the first baseman for the Tigers? And
Yeah.
he had a son, Prince. He had a brother named Craig. Craig was an older college student who had just come back to school and was getting into sports writing. So we were like the dudes who knew everything about sports and the history of sports and all that type of stuff. And, there's always like guardian angels who look out for you. And there were guardian angels in college who were like, you're a born sports writer. You just have a gift for this in a way that other people don't. And I'm not great with compliments. I wasn't then and I'm still not now. So I didn't know exactly what that meant. And they were like, come down to the school paper and like you're going to do some stuff or whatever. I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. I promise you, it never hit me that I could develop something like this. How you hear about people, they go to Northwestern, they go to Medill, they go to Mizzou, all sorts of type of stuff. They come in immediately like that. That was not me at all. Like I was not one of the chosen ones who came in with the golden parachute. Like I literally, it kind of chose me in a way. And then once I decided, like, once you're good at something and all of a sudden you want to do more and more and more of it, like once I heard that the football coach burned one of my columns at a football practice because I talked about how bad the football team was and I talked about how bad the coach was, I was like, oh, this is cool. Like this is something. Like let's take this a step further.
All right, so tell me about that article that enraged the football coach.
I don't even remember what it said because the team was so bad, right? The team was legit just bad. The coach was a boob. You know what I mean? And like, I wasn't thinking anything of it. The crazy thing was, and I still kind of feel this way, believe it or not, you write and you don't know who's reading. You don't know who's really paying attention, especially back then in 2004, whatever year it was. Like, I really wasn't thinking that people are reading the school paper. You just think you're howling at the moon and you're writing something and nobody sees that stuff. So then when I heard about it, I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I was also like doing play by play in color for like the TV side of it. You know what I mean? So I was always doing both. I always had an eye for I could always kind of see where stuff was going. And that was right when Pardon the Interruption had first come out, and I knew Michael Wilbon as the columnist from the Washington Post and Tony Kornheiser from the Style columns. And then those guys are on TV. I'm like, okay, that's pretty dope. And I knew Stephen A. Smith as the columnist for the Philadelphia Inquirer more than anything else. And Rob Parker, who's at FS1, who's at ESPN, he was my mentor. And I knew Stephen A. Smith before he became Stephen A. Smith. Like legit, I knew who Stephen A. was before like all of the other stuff that happened. So it wasn't as far fetched for me to see, that sort of example. So when that happened, I kind of felt validated, like, okay, I'm one of them now. Not like at that stature, but I am someone that has some level of impact. And when you discover that you have impact, that kind of puts the wind beneath your back a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I still tell people about when the high school tennis coach allegedly read an article I wrote and like ripped it and crumpled it up and threw it in the garbage can because I criticized him for benching players for missing a practice. And that stuff sticks with you, obviously, because, yeah, you feel that impact. So, Vinny, one of your first bylines, you're freelancing for the Detroit News, your hometown paper, and Dateline Ypsilanti, March 12th, 2006, high school swimming. Here we go. A long way from the NBA Finals. The Birmingham Grove swimming team is doing its best to dispel the belief that staying on top is tougher than getting there. Groves won its third consecutive Division II swimming championship Saturday at Eastern Michigan University. Great lead, good start. I mean, for just because what's funny was I had another article up that was much more straightforward, where it was like a straight. You must have been like a deadline high school basketball gamer, but I liked that there was just a little something, because sometimes when we get started, we only have like 300 words to work with. We need to do something those first 20. What do you remember about doing that freelancing gig, and you're at swim meets and you're at high school basketball games, and I've got a college wrestling story up here from you about kind of doing a lot of different sports at that time to get started?
Man, I don't remember that particular, like it's like grainy. Like I'm sure just like the lead might be grainy, like the memory is kind of grainy from being at like being a college student on campus. And one of my college professors was an editor at the Detroit News. And he was like, hey, why don't you come down? Ypsilanti is like 45 minutes from Detroit. He's like, why don't you come down and work a couple nights just answering the phones or whatever? And I'm like, yeah, that's cool. I get to be in a newsroom. Like, that's pretty cool. And you go from you're answering the phones, and like the reporters, the columnists, they're calling in to say, hey, did the story make it in? Or, and you might get a chance to say hi to them. A lot of times they just call in to confirm, you don't have a whole lot of time. But sometimes, and at that point, Kevin, these are like the standard people. You're not thinking about like national anything. You're thinking about the people that you can see and you can touch. So being in that environment, and if they by chance came into like the newsroom, then that was really a treat because you could say hi to them. You know what I mean? That type of thing. So working from the answering the phones went to, hey, there's a swim meet. There's this track meet. There's a baseball practice. There's high school football, high school basketball. It's like, wait, I get y'all trusting me to do that? Like every time I got a little bit of an extra responsibility, it legit became like this. Are you serious? Y'all are doing this for me? And I would take it so like serious. I would, you don't want to mess up, right? You want to reward the faith of the people who are, believing in you, because you have no idea where your career is going to go. So high school football, high school basketball, those are the days where the Wi-Fi, ain't no such thing as real Wi-Fi. You know what I mean? Like you got to go, you got to stand in the rain. You can't write from your phone. You can't do anything like that. So you got to go to maybe a Starbucks or something like that to be able to send your stuff. And it's on deadline. And it's in these adverse conditions. Like you talk about pressure of writing during the NBA finals. They got good Wi-Fi. I ain't got no problem with that. Like the real pressure came very, very early. So once I was able to do that, and you develop these bonds, not only with the people you're working for, but the people you're working with. And by with, I mean the high school coaches, the high school players. Like they know what you're doing, and they want to make sure that you're being as accurate as possible. That even if your questions aren't so great, they're giving you great answers because they want to put themselves in the best possible light and give you really good stuff. And you weren't recording on your phone, you were recording on a recorder. Like all these different things. So in some ways, that was more pure. Because it was fun, and you can't get those first things back. Those Friday nights, you can't get them back. And believe it or not, Kevin, I would do a game on Friday nights and then come back to the office, work the phones, write, do agate, and make sure that I had my story in on deadline. People don't know what agate is, Kevin.
I was just gonna say I've had a couple of guests who've kind of mentioned it, but like let's for our younger listeners, because I mean I grew up in I opened the newspaper and I went to the agate. I loved just going through the stats and the scores, especially for high school. You want to go to find kind of high school scores. Tell our younger listeners, tell Gen Z what agate was.
Okay, guys, this is what agate is. Agate is the little type that's like the standings that you see on the baseball page, especially during baseball season. That's really where you make your money. Not money. Doing your agate is making sure that everything is like lined up properly, making sure like the line scores are all parallel to each other, making sure that the baseball stats are updated nightly, so you were actually doing it by hand
and typing it in and make sure that the batting averages were all the way right and who played. And then, the agate actual page was the transactions that happened. Like some stuff would come in through the wire, and you decide, oh, nobody cares about this. And then you put in the horse racing odds and the FedEx Cup standings and all these other different things. And you had to fill this one big page and you had to figure out what worked and what didn't. And it had to all line up and everything else so that you could see it in the paper, the actual physical paper the next day.
Yeah, I mean, and this was I still remember I used to read the lines. You could get favored underdog and you get the point spread like long before you could legally gamble. They would post the lines in the paper every day. That was the agate for you young folk. So Vinny, you're doing this freelance in the stream for again your hometown paper. It sounds like you had a real appreciation for the opportunity. Like you weren't someone who was like frustrated about having to cover. Like you understood, like, hey, this is a great place to get started. When did and how did Slam magazine kind of come on your radar? And maybe tell us about how you got there.
That's interesting because I reached out to Slam because I was a reader of Slam like all the time, right? So I just reached out to like the editor, Ben Osborne, over email. He said, hey, I don't know if you need anybody, to do anything good or bad, and I reached out to him in maybe like 2005 or something. Like I had no business. I wasn't even that good of a writer to reach out to him at that point. And then he was like, no, we don't need anything. The Pistons are such a big story that if something comes up, we're going to send one of our writers there. Oh, that makes sense. And then like maybe a year later, he reached back out and said, hey, are you still in Detroit? And I'm like, yeah, I'm still here. And he was like, do you want to write a feature? And I'm like, feature in Slam? Are you kidding me? Like, what? I wanted to be Scoop Jackson. Like that was wanted to be the feature writer that went everywhere, that talked to the players, and got to write these big, beautiful pieces, and you could talk your talk. Like, he wrote in Scoop wrote in a way I love Scoop to this day. Great. When I lived in Chicago, I got to really meet him and spend a lot of time with him. Like, love him to death. Like you could write and talk in a way that sort of reached and spoke to like my demo. So they said, hey, do you want to, write this piece on the Pistons? And I was like, yeah, for sure. So I would go down to the facility. I would talk to the guys. Like that's where I first met some of the guys. And I remember walking into the Pistons locker room and Chauncey Billups, who was of course bald headed, looks at me and says, what's up, young fella? You got some good grass up there. Which I had it. Talking about my hair. And I got the first feature done. And then there was a second feature like a year later. Like first one was a feature on the team itself, like an overview of the team going into the season. And then the next one was maybe 6 months later. They asked me to do one on Rasheed Wallace. And Rasheed was actually not talking to the media at the time. But he decided to talk to me because like, hey, I'm from Slam. He loves Slam. So as he's walking out, Kevin, he has a boombox. The boombox is playing Isley Brothers' Voyage to Atlantis on it. So my recorder is catching Ronald Isley singing and Rasheed Wallace talking. And he wouldn't turn the boombox off, but he was talking to me. I had to eat it and I had to deal with it. And it turned out to be a really cool feature because I incorporated a lot of that into the color of the story. And the funny thing was, Kevin, after I wrote that, I thought, okay, I'm getting somewhere in my own paper. Like they're going to see what I'm doing here. They're going to see that I'm a really good writer. It's going to get me somewhere. And it didn't for like another maybe a year. A year and a half. So it was all like back to the bullpen you go. I wasn't doing agate at that point, but I was still very much like, okay, you're only doing high schools. You can only fill in here and there. You know what I mean? Like that sort of thing. So that's where frustration, if it was frustration, that's where it began.
Did I ask every guest for their welcome to the big leagues moment. That certainly sounds like it would be. And I don't know, maybe if when you kind of started as a full-time Pistons beat writer, if you had one, but if you think of kind of what that phrase means, welcome to the big leagues, when you knew it was real, early on in the career, what are some anecdotes, what are some things that kind of stand out for you?
Man, my first year covering the Pistons was like, it was literally like they were no longer a good team. It was the 2009-10 season. And I'll take you back like a quick second. I had gotten a job offer and this is going to be airing some people out, so I don't care if they hear it or whatever. But I really don't. I don't give it. I don't care. But everybody has their welcome. Like you're not what you think you are, sort of story. And it was a 2008 playoffs, and you got the extra writers that come in, because you're going for blowout sections and everything else. Vinny, you get to cover the team during the playoffs. We may send you to the NBA Finals if they go. So they're doing the second round. They're playing Orlando, and they play Boston in the conference finals. Dwight Howard, they send me to fetch quotes for Dwight Howard. So I'm the only black young person in the room. Dwight extends his hands and shakes my hand after he finishes his media session. And I'm like, oh, okay, Dwight Howard just shook my hand. Not like, oh, I'm in awe, but like, is that okay or whatever? Like
That sort of thing, Kevin, right? So one of the beat writers at the time, and I've long forgiven him since, because you have to forgive people. One of the beat writer, I asked him, hey, do you need quotes? And he said, no, leave me alone. All right, left him alone. I got quotes for all the columnists and everybody else. And then the next day, he says, Vinny didn't give me any quotes.
And then he says, well, Vinny's too friendly with the players.
Wow.
So then my editor at the time says, well, you know what? I don't believe you. I believe him. If the Pistons go to the NBA Finals, I was putting you down for a credential, but now you're not going. So I was crushed. I was legit crushed. And I was like, man, I got to get out of here. So, and I know I'm being long-winded, but I wound up getting a job offer like a few months later as one of my mentors took a job in Boston. Sherrod Blakely was taking a job in Boston to cover the Celtics for NBC. And he was like, hey, I need you to go on this interview. They're not going to hire you, but go on an interview just so you can go and interview and go through the process or whatever, kind of like a Rooney Rule thing, right? And I went on the interview for MLive, and they actually wanted to hire me. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to get a real job and I can make some real money. And it was like $48,000. And I thought that was like, Devin, I thought I was going to be rolling around in a Cadillac. Like, that's how much I thought, you know what I mean? Like, that sort of thing. But they wound up going through a hiring freeze. But before the hiring freeze, my editor at the time took me out to lunch to say, if they offer you the job, I don't think you should take it. I said, why not? And he said, I don't think you're ready. I think you're 2 years away from being a backup. And I was like, okay. All right. I sat there, I listened, ate my, ate my sandwich, whatever it was, cool. And then a few months later, one of the editors came down and said, the executive editor said, why are we losing this talented kid? If he's going to take this job and we've had him for 4 years being a freelancer, a stringer, da 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 da, why are we losing him? And they said, no, give him the beat for the last 4 months of the season. Like, okay, we're having budget cuts, so don't travel him, but just have him cover the home games, have him cover the practices. He's the beat guy, and if that's the case, then he'll be the beat guy next year. So that's what happened. I covered the team for the rest of the 9-10 season, and then in July, they officially handed me the beat. So that was like, it was kind of a long time coming while I'm still very young, and I'm still kind of jaded from the experience of people trying to sabotage me. You know what I mean? Like, that's the welcome. Like, the call is coming from inside the house type of thing. But as much as I had those two people working against me, I had so many other people pouring into me, telling me, this is not going to last. Whatever reason they don't like you, don't worry about it. You're going to get your shot. And I stayed patient enough, and the shot wound up coming. So that season, I capitalized on every single opportunity. I let no stone go unturned. I got cussed out by players a couple times. I caused some things and stirred up some things because I had that competitiveness. I'm going to show even the people in this own building that I'm worthy of this. Like, you walk into a place and you're 24, 25 years old, you have this natural insecurity of wanting to prove to people that you belong. So you own every big story. You're hitting on everything, and you're not taking the chance to have somebody beat you on something. So that first year, it was like, I'm proving to the players who I was cool with. I'm proving to like the entire universe that I'm in that you're not going to look at me as just some young kid. You're going to look at me and respect me.
Oh, what a story, Vinny. It's crazy too, because you think about what we do. Like, you have a job where you answer to editors. and you answer to your bosses. But then when you're at shoot around or you're at a locker room, you're also in a weird way answering to teams in the league. And so it's hard enough to like get in with NBA players and coaches and personnel people and then have to fight what you had to fight at your own shop to get there. How like, you know, when you look back at that now 15 years later, in what ways has it shaped the way you are today as just a reporter, just a person, just going through that experience?
Yeah, it doesn't leave you. Like you live in Chicago. You know the Michael Jordan phrase. I took that personally.
You know what I mean? Like that becomes your mantra. That becomes like your theme song. And I don't want it to seem like, man, I'm just doing this to prove people wrong. Because I had like Phil LaFleur was in my corner. That was the executive sports editor. The week that I got promoted, he got promoted back into being the sports editor. He was my biggest champion for the whole time I was there. He always made sure that, you know, sometimes he had a lot of fire under me, but all the time he was always my biggest champion. Like to this day, I still love the guy. Actually, you know, he lives in Chicago now. So, but yeah, I made sure that was the thing that always drove me. You know what I mean? Like you never want to get complacent. You never want to feel like you're getting too comfortable. But once again, I want to make this clear to people. Being a national writer of any form was not the thought. Being on TV was never the thought. In the newspaper world, it's okay, if you can be a beat writer for 20 years, that's stability. You know what I mean? Like my mother worked the same job for 40 years. So for her to see me change jobs and shift jobs, she viewed that as like, wait, you got a good job. Why are you leaving? Because they're offering me more money. That's why. But you got a good job. Why are you leaving? Like that sort of thing. But I get that because in my standpoint, I was thinking, okay, columnist, that seems the far-fetched thing. That's the thing that doesn't seem like can be attainable at all at a newspaper. Columnists seem further away than going to Yahoo or going to ESPN because it's right there, but it doesn't feel like it can happen for you. So long story short, you always keep that sort of, man, I got to keep this good job that I have. I have to make sure that I'm validating the trust that people are putting in me every single day. And that was one of the things that kept me because I was only the beat writer in Detroit for 5 years. It seems like I was there for 10, but I was only there for 5.
The first year that you're the full-time Detroit Pistons beat writer, like this is your first kind of real everything, your full-time thing. What, like if you think back to that year, what stands out? Interactions, stories you wrote, things you experienced. What are some things that always stand out to you?
Richard Hamilton. That's the thing that stands out to me. That was probably one of the most tumultuous seasons in franchise history. They had just come off all the championship conference finals appearances. They were going to a rebuild. They weren't used to not winning games. So what happens is, as a beat writer, when you're covering a team that thinks they should be winning games and they aren't winning games, they got to blame somebody. And people are going to start chirping. So the locker room was chirping, and someone said, you know, hey, Rip wasn't exactly sick tonight. Rip quit on us. And when a player says quit, that's the buzzword. I wrote the story. Didn't think it was that big of a deal, to be perfectly honest. Like I actually wanted to wait a couple of days later to talk to Rip, but my editors were afraid that the Detroit Free Press had the story, and they were like, write it. You just got to write it and deal with it. And I wasn't strong enough. I didn't have a strong enough stature at the time to say, no, I'm going to hold off and wait till the next day at practice or whatever it is. I won't say it's a regret, but it's one of those things that you understand your own power and your own agency because it's your name at the byline. It's not necessary. Nobody knows who your editor is. You got to show up at practice the next day. So I write the story, it's sourced and everything else. And all of a sudden, as opposed to being like 4 people at practice, just the beat writers, it's like 50. Like the TV crews are there and everybody's there to talk to the player. And he's not sure who wrote the story, but he doesn't want to confront, you know, me or whoever he thinks it is. And then the day after Christmas, he confronts me in the locker room. And you know the rule, Kevin. You say what you say in the paper. You got to give them the opportunity to say whatever they're going to say in the locker room. And I knew what was happening. I had talked to some of my mentors beforehand. They're like, look, it don't matter the circumstances. You go in there, and as long as he doesn't disrespect you, you're good. So he comes in, he starts yelling and screaming. He didn't say the two magic words. He said like the 3 or 4 magic words, but he didn't say the 2 magic words. And it's about 90 seconds, and I'm saying, Rip, you gonna talk or you gonna cuss me out? I said, I'm gonna cuss you out. All right, cool. So then, like 90 seconds later, the PR person comes in and says, all right, Vinny, you had to say, Rip, you had to say, cool. We didn't talk for the rest of the year. We didn't talk for 5 years after that. He gave me a nickname, Kevin. He gave me a nickname. This is the best part of it. The nickname I had was TMOT. That is an acronym. Do you want to guess what the acronym is?
I don't want to guess what the acronym is.
Let's just
I
say,
started to.
let's just say, the M could be MF, right?
But that M over there, because he said that in a scrum to everybody in the media, he was like, well, there's some people trying to bring us down, especially that MF over there. And I'm like, is he talking about me? And then he said it again. And I was like, all right, I'm going to just leave the locker room because, that's what like your pride and everything gets in the way and all of that type of stuff.
Yeah.
Like, we're cool now. We have made up. We see each other. We cool. Like, me and Rip are legit cool now. But in that moment, we weren't. And we weren't for a minute. So, but yeah, that was my rookie year. I didn't know that I covered an abnormal rookie year. I thought that was what beat writing was nonsense every day.
Yeah. And it wasn't. Like, the next couple years are actually boring. I'm like, man, what's the drama? Like, this is the regular team.
Well, so Vinny, we're talking on Tuesday, day after game. What did we have last night? Game 5 of the NBA Finals, Thunder Pacers. You were there. You've been traversing back and forth. You got probably half residency now in Oklahoma City for the past month. You've got your podcast. We see you on TV. You're doing great things. When you think back to that first beat job with the Pistons, and even go back to your stringing, go back to your high school stuff. What are some of the skills and things you learned that like still matter today? What's like that through line from 2006 through 10, maybe Vinnie Goodwill to 2025?
It's something I'm still learning to some degree because I'm a natural introvert, and I think people see the personality. If you're watching me on Dan Patrick and I'm messing with Dan Patrick about music and stuff like that, you don't see an introvert. You see someone very outgoing, but naturally, you see that. So having to step outside yourself and ask questions and remaining like, I know it sounds like really sappy, but like remaining like genuinely curious. Like that was always my thing, is to not question people, like, challenge them, but to kind of in a way poke. Like great questions produce great answers. And if you ask a question that makes someone think just a little bit, you might get something like really, really good. And sometimes the simple question is, what happened? And if you leave it open-ended as opposed to leading the witness and showing how smart you are, because a lot of times
We try to do that. We ask these filibuster questions in press conference. So I'm like, tapping my wrist, like, this is the 24 shot clock, second shot clock that's going up, and you still asking questions. You know what I mean? You're giving a dissertation and expecting them to keep up with you. Sometimes you ask the simple question. Like I asked Shea Gilgeous-Alexander after game 4, where he had 15 points in the last 5 minutes. I said, this is like an NBA Finals moment. Did you know you were in the moment? He gave me a really great answer that wound up being replayed and everything else. And sometimes it's just the simple stuff. It's not about showing how smart you are. It's about gathering the insight from them at whatever place that you can meet them at. And I think that's the best thing that I've learned, is meeting people where they are, as opposed to my force of personality making people come to me. I'm humbled enough that I can come to you.
We'll wrap up with 2 present day NBA questions. As I said, this podcast is going to run. The finals are going to be over. It's been like this weird NBA finals from a media perspective. You see it all, like who's the face of the NBA, and like everyone's talking about the ratings and the mid markets. I just think it's been fun basketball. I'm curious though, when you think about, like, I will ask you a big picture question though. You look at what SGA and the Thunder have done. You look at Halliburton just becoming this household name with the Pacers. You think about what the Knicks did. and you think about Cooper Flagg coming in. What's like this like when if you think about ahead to like next season? Because like I had David Aldridge on like a month or two ago, and we talked about like the NBA post LeBron and Steph. Just looking at like what these finals have meant, like what do you think it means maybe for the NBA going forward? Like, can there be some kind of pickup from like, hey, this was good basketball. These were two mid-market teams, and this was potentially these new household names. Like, how do you look at this finals moving forward to the next season?
I think the important thing to realize for me, people are missing in the ratings discussion is not about the markets. People are saying, well, Indiana, it's the Pacers, and then it's Oklahoma City. I don't think anybody watches or doesn't watch something because of where the game is. That sounds actually silly. If you have a Nielsen box and you're saying, man, this game is in Oklahoma City, I don't want to watch them. I want to watch the backdrop of New York City, maybe. But if you have a criticism, it is, are the players noticeable enough? Are they compelling enough? Are there compelling stories being displayed on television where there's enough character with these guys that makes me interested? Like, one of the things the NBA is learning to do at this point is marketing itself in this new sort of ecosystem where the NBA that we knew in the 90s, it was the NBA and Nike marketing. Nike marketed Michael Jordan. Nike marketed Charles Barkley. Nike marketed so many different faces. And then NBC was there. And then everybody sort of latched on. It was a group effort. It wasn't just one entity. And those things kind of worked in concert. Whereas now it's so many different strategies and places that you can't reach everybody at once. And there's no one galvanizing personality. Like LeBron's first trip to the NBA Finals in 2007, they had pretty bad ratings. And that's LeBron James. And we knew who LeBron was dating back to the Hummer in 2001. And by 2007, he was pretty damn good, but yet people weren't tuning in. So I say that to say it takes time to build brand equity, player equity with the fans. And if the Thunder are going to be here, people are going to get used to seeing them on this stage. It would help if they show more personality and let people in more. But I think the people are going to get used to seeing them more so than, oh my God, I don't want to watch Oklahoma City. I should be worried about that more than you. You ain't got to get up and top of Oklahoma City. I do.
How's that Oklahoma City Indianapolis flight treating you?
No comment.
We never want to complain about our travel, you know. Nope. All right, I wrap up with a self-serving question. This is for the podcast listeners. I did this last week with Emily Kaplan because I asked her how to fix the Blackhawks. Vinny, you were here covering the Bulls for a few years. I joked with you before we started that if you look at the Bulls, they this drought began when Vinnie Goodwill was covering the Bulls for NBC Sports Chicago. So I'm not going to fully blame you. There's a lot of people in that organization you can blame, but I will give you the floor. How would you fix the Chicago Bulls?
The first step to fixing a problem is admitting there's a problem, right?
They've struggled at that.
You've got to go to Michael Reinsdorf and say, hey, what we've been doing isn't necessarily working. Like, I do like a couple of the young pieces that they have, but you're not going to get bad enough to allow them to grow, and they're not going to get experienced enough to really challenge. So you have to kind of choose a path and say, hey, here's the problem, Kevin. Even before I finish that, here's the problem. The Indiana Pacers never tank, and they're in your backyard. And you're looking at them saying, well, they never tanked. Why can't we? Well, then if that's the case, you have to be an expert at scouting. You have to be an expert in the trade market. And Arturas Karnisovas does not come out in the public and tell everybody what his strategy is. Michael Reinsdorf really wants to win badly. I think that's kind of one of those misnomer things like, oh, man, as long as the people keep coming. No, I think he wants to win. The problem is you don't always know how. And when you trust people to do their jobs, and that's the genuine trust, and you get out the way, then you got to trust them to do their jobs. Sometimes they haven't hired the right people. And you got to have the person who can explain the basketball vision and explain it with clarity to the people so that, hey, we're not where we want to be right now, but the plan is, okay, Kobe White and Matas Bus, you know what I'm saying? And all these young guys, and this is how we're going to do it. Or we're going to say, you know what, we're going to get everything, all the draft picks we can. Can you guys be patient with us for a couple of years? I think if they actually said that, I think the fans would be okay with it. But if you're saying you're playing for a ninth seed or a 10th seed, people can't buy into that. Not when they've had Michael Jordan in the Chicago. Those images are still so very fresh. Those, they're being haunted by Michael Jordan in the Chicago Bulls more than anything else. Not Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen. Michael Jordan.
It's crazy. It's been we're coming on almost 30 years since they've even been at the finals. It's just it's crazy.
And it feels like yesterday, doesn't it? It feels like yesterday that they were there, and it feels like a long time ago that they won a playoff game or like a meaningful playoff game all at the same time.
Right. As I said, I think the last one was right before you got here. So,
my bad.
Vinny, this was a lot of fun. Again, thank you for doing this during your NBA Finals travel. This will be up when the finals are over, so people should go check out your podcast, go read what you wrote about the finals at Yahoo, and thanks for telling us your origin story.